Gabriel, hi.
Hey, Gabriel. And maybe come down another step. You'll probably get closer. You say
Can you
Gabriel?
hear me now? Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
All right, so my question's about the moral argument, specifically the first premise. So the first premise is basically saying it's logically impossible for any other view without God to essentially have morality at all. That implies, logical impossibility implies a contradiction within all the other views that try to do this. So could you please tell me the contradiction with atheistic moral Platonism?
I'm not saying it's a logical contradiction. What I'm saying is it's a practical one, because let's suppose that Platonism is true, that there's this value called justice. Why am I obligated to obey it?
In the same sense, you would be obligated in the same sense that you were obligated to follow God.
No, but justice is not a person, so why am I obligated to obey something that's not personal?
Yeah, so one instance, right, is we can understand justice or the good, and you follow the good because these are, under the Platonist view, necessary things and reasonable things. So if you don't follow them, you're unreasonable.
Okay, the problem is, how can justice exist if it's not personal? What does that even mean?
Yeah, so justice is a concept. Within the Platonistic view, right, it's just an abstract concept. There doesn't need to be it being a thing such that it is personal, right? This would also go against the moral argument in the sense that we've already agreed there is a sense of morality that is founded and logically possible without God already. You've already conceded the moral
argument.
No,
I haven't conceded it without God. People can invent.
So what's the contradiction?
People can invent their own moralities. They can invent and say, I think this is good or that is good. Hitler thought killing
That would imply a contradiction within this view, though.
Why is it a contradiction?
The moral argument implies a contradiction within the first premise. It's a deductive argument.
Okay, what's your first premise for the moral argument?
No God, no objective morals.
Okay, well you could do it that way, or you could say you could say, if objective moral values exist, then God exists.
That would imply a contradiction.
If objective moral values
views.
don't exist, well, you could still have God.
That would still imply a contradiction within the other views, yeah.
Okay.
So you would concede the moral argument then if there's no contradiction within the Platonistic view.
Well, what I'm saying is, it's sort of like physics. Someone like Sean Carroll, who is an atheistic physicist, can create a model, right, and say that this model could explain how the universe got here without God, but he's got no evidence for that model. Like, I could create a model where things come into existence out of nothing by nothing and say that's how I explain how the universe got here, sans God.
So you don't think there's evidence for objective morality?
I think there is evidence for objective morality, but that evidence is an effect. Now I need to reason back to a cause, and the cause of that effect has to be personal.
Why? What's the contradiction? That would also imply a contradiction within the view. If there's no contradiction, it's possible then. To say that it is personal is to imply
I can't see how we get obligations.
Well, that's a separate question then. How
Okay.
you get obligations is separate from can objective morality exist? Those are two separate questions. I would agree it's important, but that's a separate question.
How can objective morality exist sans an objective moral lawgiver? See, I'm saying there is an objective moral law, and if there is an objective moral law, there has to be an objective moral lawgiver. Where the laws come from lawgivers, right?
Only civil laws, because that would beg the question. You would be begging the question implicitly by saying, look, if there exists a moral law, there needs to exist a moral lawgiver. That would imply a God. That's just begging the question.
No,
you're not addressing the view.
I think laws come from lawgivers, and I think laws of logic come from God, laws of mathematics come from God.
You would assume that, right?
Yes.
And I'm asking, why are we assuming that already within the premise if the atheistic Platonists can easily account for these with no contradiction?
No, I don't think atheistic Platonists can, because laws come from a mind.
Well, that would imply a contradiction within the views. What's the contradiction?
I'm not following what the contradiction is.
Yeah, agreed. There is no contradiction.
Okay, well, it would be like me saying universes can pop into existence out of nothing. It may not be contradictory, it's just against all experience. So why should I believe it?
Well, then that wouldn't be the moral argument. The moral argument is a deductive argument, not an inductive or abductive one. So that would immediately dismiss the moral argument on principle.
Well, maybe you can tell me why I should obey. First of all, how does justice exist independent of a mind?
Yeah, so it can exist as an abstract concept in the same way that math exists, right? 1 + 1 will always equal 2.
Right,
We
if
can understand
something
justice
exists-
as the same fashion.
Right, but this world is set up in a mathematical grid because it's the product of a mind.
That would be begging the question, though.
No, it's not begging the question.
would
I'm
be.
saying the best evidence for a mathematical grid is a mind.
Then that's not deductive, that's inductive.
I'm not saying it has to be deductive.
Then you would disagree with the moral argument because it's a deductive one.
Well, no, maybe it can be. There's different ways of formulating the moral argument.
I would agree there's different ways,
Okay.
right? I would totally concede that, right? If you would like
Okay.
to say that morality is best explained by God, that's perfectly fine. I'll even grant that for the sake of the arguments. But then that implies that atheists can ground morality. You just don't think it's the best ground. And this would account
Well-
for what the Phil Papers survey, with majority of meta-ethicists, agree that atheists can. There's no contradiction, there's no issue. If you pick up any intro to meta-ethics,
again,
perfectly fine.
You can make something be logically consistent and still be false, as you know.
Yeah, perfectly agreed.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
perfectly agreed.
we don't have a disagreement there.
Well, we do, because
Why?
you hold the moral argument to be true, which would imply that all their views are contradictory, definitionally.
It depends on how you formulate the moral argument.
I would agree, but the moral argument
I'm using
is
an inference to
deductive.
the best explanation.
If you're using it that
Yeah.
way, perfectly fine, but
Okay.
you can no longer say that atheists can't have objective morality, because they in fact can. You just don't think it's the
look,
best explanation.
Just like Sean Carroll can have a model that creates the universe,
Yeah,
but
perfectly agreed.
it just doesn't fit reality.
Well,
So-
actually, no. There are plenty of different views which do fit reality. We can take ethical naturalism. We can take any other views.
Let
there's
me
like
ask you,
400
let's
different.
go back to purpose, and then we got to move
Sure.
on. If there is no God, there's no purpose.
I would disagree. If there is no God, my heart's purpose is still to pump blood.
Yes, but the reason your heart exists is because there is a God.
That would beg the question. That's just assuming God
Okay,
exists
so
when that's
what
in
is the
question.
purpose of life then?
The purpose of life we can understand to live in society and do what kind of society wants. That's kind of like a simplistic one.
Okay,
or we can understand the purpose from a
Okay, so
platonistic view
if a
to
Nazi
align with the
if
good.
a Nazi society decides to murder Jews,
No, that wouldn't
that's-
be correct.
well, now you're reporting
No,
a
no,
standard.
no. So when talking about the platonistic view, right, we can understand the purpose of life is to align with that. And the Nazis would
Why?
go
Who
completely
said?
against
Who
that.
said?
No, that's just what the platonistic view is.
Okay,
and
well-
we can understand going with the platonistic view leads to goodness, happiness, and life. And we can see this empirically.
Yeah, well, again, you're assuming a standard of what goodness is, what happiness is. You're assuming all those standards.
You also assume that with God.
Without a standard giver, which
No,
I
the
think
standard
God.
is the objective moral laws that exist.
It doesn't exist sans God.
Well,
but
what's
thank
the
you.
contradiction then?
Thank you. Can I give you a book? Would you read it?
Sure, I'll read it, but what's the contradiction?
If Christianity were true, would you become a Christian?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
What's the contradiction, though?
You don't need a contradiction to show something's true.
I would agree.
Okay.
But the moral argument is a deductive one. It requires a
It
contradiction
can be,
to
or
be
it can
true.
be inference to the best explanation.
Yeah, but that wouldn't show that
Okay,
atheism can't
all right.
account for morality.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Have a good one.
Appreciate it.